I caught my wife cheating with her personal trainer. Instead of apologizing, she demanded a divorce and half of everything we owned. I didn't argue. I quietly put my plan into motion. By the time we reached court, she realized she wasn't walking away with a fortune, she was walking away with nothing. Hello. Reddit I plus here. I never imagined the worst day of my marriage would also become the day I stopped being afraid of losing everything. I'm 37, and I work as a financial analyst for a regional investment firm. Numbers have always made sense to me, emotions, not so much. Friends joke that I can stay calm while everyone else is panicking. Looking back, that personality probably saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. My ex-wife, Brianna, is 34. We were together for 7 years and married for 3. We never had children, mostly because we both agreed to wait until we felt financially secure. After the wedding, she quit her job in event planning. She insisted she wanted to focus on building our home and finding herself. I supported her decision without hesitation. I paid every bill. I covered every vacation. I encouraged every hobby she wanted to try. I truly believed we were building a future together. For years, I never questioned her loyalty. Then everything changed. She suddenly became obsessed with fitness. At first, I thought it was healthy. She signed up for a luxury gym, bought expensive workout clothes, and spent hours there almost every day. Soon, those 2-hour workouts became 4-hour training sessions. Her phone never left her hand. She started sleeping with it under her pillow. She changed her password. If I walked into a room while she was texting, she'd instantly flip the phone over. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd accuse me of being controlling. You don't own me. I need space. You've become paranoid. Those words stayed in my head for weeks. One Friday evening, she left her smartwatch charging on the kitchen counter while she showered upstairs. Notifications kept appearing. Most were ordinary. Then one flashed across the screen. Miss you already. Last night was worth every risk. The sender's name was saved as Coach. I knew immediately. Curiosity became certainty when another message appeared. Same hotel Tuesday? Your husband never suspects a thing. My stomach dropped. Instead of confronting her immediately, I took pictures of every notification with my phone. After she left the bathroom, I casually asked how her workout went. She smiled. Great. Leg day. Hours later, I learned she'd spent that afternoon in a hotel with her personal trainer. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I simply started paying attention. Over the next 3 weeks, I quietly gathered evidence. Hotel receipts, restaurant reservations, security footage from our neighborhood showing him picking her up. Photos from social media she thought disappeared after 24 hours. Even emails discussing apartments they planned to rent together after our divorce. Apparently, they had already named the dog they wanted. Reading those messages hurt more than the affair itself. She wasn't confused. She wasn't guilty. She was planning an entirely new life while smiling across the dinner table every night. When I finally confronted her, I expected tears. Instead, she laughed. I'm actually glad you found out. Those were the first words out of her mouth. She admitted everything without hesitation. Then she leaned back in her chair like she was discussing the weather. I've already spoken to an attorney. That surprised me. You'll sell the house. I get half the savings. I also deserve temporary support until I get back on my feet. She actually smiled. You'll recover. You make plenty of money. Not once did she apologize. Not once did she ask whether I was okay. Her biggest concern was calculating what she believed she'd receive. I simply nodded. If divorce is what you want, that's what we'll do. She looked almost disappointed that I wasn't begging. For the next month, she acted strangely cheerful. She began shopping online for luxury furniture. I overheard her telling a friend they were looking at beachfront condos. She even told her trainer, whose real name was Preston, that she'd soon have enough money to help him open his own private gym. There was just one problem. The fortune she thought existed didn't belong to us. Years before I married, my grandfather had drilled one lesson into me. Never place family assets at unnecessary risk. Following his advice, I never purchased major investments personally. The house we lived in belonged to a family property trust established long before my marriage. The investment account she constantly bragged about also held by that trust. The vacation cabin? Family-owned. Even the luxury SUV she loved driving every day technically belonged to my father's construction company because it was leased through the business. Everything had been legally structured years before Brianna entered my life. My personal assets consisted of my salary account, retirement contributions made during the marriage, and a modest checking account. Comfortable, not wealthy. When our attorneys exchanged financial disclosures, her confidence vanished. She called me screaming before I even got home. Where's everything? That's everything. Stop lying! I haven't. You hid money. No, you assumed ownership? She refused to believe it. Her attorney demanded additional documentation. Every document was produced. Every trust agreement predated our marriage. every transfer had years of records. Everything was completely legitimate. Even her own lawyer eventually told her the same thing. She wasn't getting half of millions. She was dividing a far smaller marital estate. Meanwhile, Preston apparently had already quit taking new clients because he'd expected Brianna's divorce money to bankroll his dream gym. According to mutual acquaintances, they argued constantly afterward. Then came the betrayal she never expected. He disappeared. He'd blocked her. Moved to another city after accepting a management position elsewhere. The woman he'd promised to build a future with suddenly became someone else's problem. I assumed that would be the end. I was wrong. The divorce finalized quietly, and I thought I could finally move on. Then Brianna launched one last attack. She filed motions accusing me of hiding assets, committing financial fraud, and intentionally deceiving the court. Every allegation required responses. Every filing cost money. It became obvious she wasn't trying to win. She wanted to exhaust me until I'd offer a settlement just to make everything stop. She also started calling my mother, my sister, even old coworkers. She claimed I'd emotionally abused her throughout our marriage, that I'd manipulated finances, that I controlled every aspect of her life. Most people ignored her. The few who knew us simply asked for evidence. She never had any. At the final hearing, the judge reviewed months of accusations. One by one, every claim fell apart. The trusts had existed years before the marriage. Financial disclosures had been complete. No hidden accounts, no fraud, no misconduct. After dismissing her claims, the judge warned that continuing to file unsupported motions could result in sanctions. For the first time since all this began, Brianna looked genuinely scared. Outside the courthouse, she tried a different strategy. She caught up to me in the parking lot. Her voice instantly changed. I made mistakes. I was confused. We could fix this. Then came the tears. Real or fake, I honestly couldn't tell. When I didn't respond, the mask slipped again. If you don't help me financially, I'll tell everyone what kind of husband you really were. Silence. I'll ruin your reputation. Silence. I'll keep dragging you back into court. Still silence. She stepped closer. You owe me after everything I sacrificed. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said the only sentence she truly deserved. You traded loyalty for greed, and now you're asking the man you betrayed to rescue you from the consequences of your own choices. I turned around. She shouted after me, threats, insults, promises that she'd make me regret everything. I never looked back. 6 months later, I heard she'd moved into a tiny apartment with 2 roommates after burning through nearly all the money she actually received. Preston was engaged to someone else, and the friends who once encouraged her affair had quietly disappeared from her life. As for me, I kept my peace. I kept my integrity. Most importantly, I walked away with something far more valuable than money. I walked away knowing that sometimes the greatest victory isn't making the other person lose. It's refusing to let their betrayal define the rest of your life. You see, I thought that chapter of my life was finally over. I was wrong. About 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I came home from work and found a certified envelope taped to my front door. For a split second, I thought it was another lawsuit. Instead, it was a notice from a private investigator requesting an interview. I almost laughed. Apparently, Brianna had hired someone to prove I was secretly hiding millions of dollars. She still couldn't accept that she'd gambled on a fantasy that never existed. The investigator called me the following afternoon. I've been looking into your finances for 6 weeks. Okay. I think your ex-wife has unrealistic expectations. That was probably the most professional way anyone had ever described her. He explained that he'd verified everything. The family trust existed long before I met Brianna. The businesses belonged to my father and uncle. The investment portfolio she'd been obsessing over wasn't mine to divide, and there wasn't some secret offshore account waiting to be discovered. Before hanging up, he said something that stuck with me. I've done this job for 15 years. Usually when someone spends this much money trying to prove they're right, it's because they already know they're wrong. A month later, another surprise landed in my lap. My attorney called. You'll want to hear this. Brianna had filed yet another complaint, this time claiming she deserved reimbursement because she'd contributed to increasing the value of the family estate. My lawyer sighed before continuing. She says hosting holiday dinners and choosing paint colors makes her entitled to part of the trust. I honestly didn't know whether to laugh or feel sorry for her. The judge didn't have the same patience. At the hearing, Brianna arrived with a stack of binders and an attitude that suggested she believed she'd finally cornered me. Her attorney looked exhausted before the proceedings even started. After reviewing the filings, the judge asked one simple question. What evidence do you have that the respondent concealed marital assets? There was a long silence. Her lawyer quietly admitted there wasn't any. Everything they had was speculation. The judge dismissed the motion in less than 20 minutes. Then something happened I wasn't expecting. The judge looked directly at Brianna. This court is not a tool for personal revenge. The courtroom became so quiet you could hear papers rustling. If you continue filing unsupported claims, the court will consider awarding attorney's fees against you. Her face went completely pale. Outside the courthouse, she chased after me again. You planned all of this! No. You tricked me. No. I protected myself years before I even knew you existed. She crossed her arms, and people think you're some hero. I never asked anyone to. You made me look like the villain. I finally stopped walking. No, Brianna. You did that all by yourself, she glared at me. You'll end up alone. I smiled politely. I'd rather be alone than live another day with someone I can't trust. She had no response, just anger. A few weeks later, one of our former mutual friends reached out. There was gossip spreading around town. Apparently, Preston hadn't just left Brianna. He'd also been seeing 2 other married women from the same gym at the exact same time. When the stories started colliding, the gym terminated his contract after multiple clients filed complaints over inappropriate relationships. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man Brianna had called her soulmate had been running the same game on several women simultaneously. She hadn't been special. She'd simply been next in line. Months passed peacefully after that. I focused on work, started traveling again, reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my marriage. For the first time in years, my home actually felt peaceful. Then, almost a year after the divorce, I received one final text from an unknown number. I know I don't deserve it, but can we meet? Just once. I knew exactly who it was. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet at a quiet coffee shop in broad daylight. She looked nothing like the woman who had walked out of our marriage believing she'd won. The confidence was gone. The designer clothes had been replaced with bargain store outfits. She looked tired, older. She admitted she'd burned through nearly all of her settlement trying to maintain the lifestyle she'd expected me to continue funding. She'd bounced between temporary jobs. The friends who encouraged her affair had disappeared. Even members of her own family had stopped answering her calls after months of asking for money. Then she slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a handwritten letter. I wanted you to know I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to hear it from me. I folded the letter and placed it back inside the envelope. I appreciate the apology. She looked hopeful. But an apology doesn't restore trust. Her eyes filled with tears. I know. I really loved you. I nodded. I believe that. She looked confused. But at some point, you loved what you thought you could get more than the person standing beside you. Neither of us spoke for almost a minute. Finally, she asked quietly, Do you think we'll ever be friends? I stood up, picked up my coat, and placed enough cash on the table to cover both coffees. I genuinely hope you build a better life. But that life won't include me. That was the last time I ever saw Brianna. As I walked out of the cafe, I realized something. For months, she'd been trying to drag me back into court, back into arguments, back into the chaos she'd created. But closure wasn't something she could demand from a judge or manipulate through guilt. Closure came the moment I chose not to carry her mistakes any further. I walked to my car, started the engine, and drove toward a future that finally belonged to me. Some endings don't need revenge. Sometimes the greatest revenge is becoming completely unreachable.